Hello and welcome back. We're on chapter 3. The rain had continued all night, but the travellers were warm and cosy in their beds, tucked in with the covers, but also warmed in their hearts with their latest treasure. That their weakness, of which they felt there was much, was all used in the King's plan for their life, and that his grace, God's riches at Christ's expense, was enough to get them through the hardest trial. As often happens with the dawn after a night of heavy rain, the birds sang sweeter than normal, their voices of praise to the one who made them, ringing out as the sun rose and started to warm the earth once more. The travellers lay in bed, for it is not necessary to get up early every morning, listening to the bird song and praising the king for his goodness and protection and provision. Have you ever noticed that the birds sing praises morning and night without fail, regardless of what their day or night has been like? Observed Mr. Newhart when they met for breakfast that morning. It is quite a challenge, confessed Mr. Discover the Truth, for I know I do not always feel like praising when I have had a rough day or a disturbed night. I too, sighed Mr. Saved by Grace. I would say we have much to learn from these little creatures. Much indeed, agreed Mr. Discover the Truth and Mr. Newhart together. After they had breakfasted, a refreshing meal of the bread of life and the cup of the new covenant, they retook the road and made good their departure. The sun was out and quickly drying up the ground, so there was a warmness in the air, which one may not expect so early in the morning. After a while, the road took them through a large meadow where some people had sat down to enjoy a picnic. But what with all the insects from the night's rain, they were not having a good time of it and had started to pack their things away and were quietly grumbling. "Good day," called out Mr. Newhart. "Good," yelled one. "What's good about it? The sun is starting to burn us, the ground is still damp and smells musty, and the ants have gotten into our sandwiches and ruined the whole day for us." "Oh, but surely the day is yet young, and your picnic can be redeemed," called out Mr. Newhart cheerfully. "It's no use," cried out the gentleman, who was dressed very finely and not at all in the kind of attire one would wear for an outdoor picnic. "It's ruined. I ask you, why would the king put a lovely meadow where there were ants and rain and burning sun? He doesn't sound all that kind to me, spoiling our pleasure like that. It's almost cruel, and me all dressed up to impress the ladies too." At this, some of the ladies in his party giggled and looked away. But Mr. Newhart sighed. "I fear this is one Mr. Ungrateful," he whispered to his companions. "I knew him when I was younger, and he had the most dreadful reputation for always seeing the gloomy side of things, and worse still, blaming the king for his perceived misfortunes." "Tut," said Mr. Saved by Grace, but quickly checked himself, as it is best to cast a beam out of your own eye first. "Friend," he called out to Mr. Ungrateful, as so he was, "will you not rather thank the king that you have nice clothes and nice food and nice friends? Will you not indeed see how none of what you have that you find enjoyment in is yours to keep or order, but is rather a kind and benevolent gift from the king of these lands?" "Kind? Pah!" exclaimed the man. "I say it is downright cruel." And then to the ladies, "Come, I can see there is no use passing the time with these fellows. Let us go and seek pleasure elsewhere." And with that he strode off with his back to the road. "It is a sad truth," sighed Mr. Newhart, "but I was once not so unlike yonder gentleman, save for his terrible choice in trousers." He smiled ruefully, but then looked grave. "I too used to think that all my misfortunes were unjust and wholly undeserved, even though, as that last poor lost man has exposed, we are never so deserving of misfortune as when we are ungrateful for what we do have." "But I do wonder," broke in Mr. Discover the Truth, "if there might not be something in what the young gentleman said. Not the bit about the ants and the damp, of course, but the placement of the meadow. Maybe," he paused, "maybe there is providence in the placement of the meadow itself." Whatever he meant by this was made quite clear by his actions, as moments later he took hold of his trowel and began to systematically walk up and down the meadow, and his friends quickly followed suit, each taking a corner and combing every inch until— "I think I found something," called out Mr. Saved by Grace, and his voice sounded so excited that his friends quickly joined him. "You see this little hillock bit here, where the ground is raised in a mound different to the rest of the meadow?" "Yes," cried both the hunters as they got to work removing the topsoil gently, for fear they may be disturbing a burial ground or some other oddity that required careful excavation so as not to damage what lay beneath. What lay beneath was indeed a buried coffin, or rather the contents, with some rotten wood and only the brass handles that let them know that this had once been a casket of some great merchant. "This must have been from years ago. Look at the markings on the handles," whispered Mr. Newhart. For when one is around death of any kind, one ought to keep one's voice low and solemn. "They look like more of that ancient script we saw on the granite stone," said Mr. Saved by Grace, his voice in hushed tones. Like it, but not exactly, observed Mr. Discover the Truth. Hang on, let me get the glasses the officer gave us. My, he breathed. How very curious. He held up one handle to the light so he could see more clearly and adjusted his glasses. This one says, and you will shrink, 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 but the words get smaller. Well, let's have a look, said Mr. Newhart. So it does. And after some thought, I suppose it makes sense for the letters to shrink with the words. Yes, but what does it mean? Asked Mr. Saved by Grace. Mr. Discover the Truth picked up the other handle and studied it. Aha! He said, with such an increase in volume from the awed whispers they had been using that poor Mr. Saved by Grace jumped and Mr. Newhart dropped the handle he was holding. What is it? They both queried. This one says, neglect your Bible and forget to pray, he said. And you'll shrink, 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 chimed in the others. This was an old song that they had been taught when they were children, a song of perseverance in the first verse, which says, read your Bible, pray every day, and you'll grow, 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 with the words getting bigger, of course, because it was designed to teach young children, and then a verse of great caution, which was the verse that the treasure hunters had now discovered on the brass handles of the merchant's coffin. Another treasure, but not a very pretty one, observed Mr. Newhart. Not pretty indeed, but all that glitters is not gold, said Mr. Discover the Truth. Remember that had we told Mr. Ungrateful he was sitting on a historical treasure, he would have grumbled and not even ventured to lift a finger to help discover it, let alone a trowel. And I bet he hasn't even held a Bible, let alone read one, and so he wouldn't think this cautionary message is a treasure anyway, said Mr. Saved by Grace sadly. Not so, friend, said Mr. Newhart, for I myself gave him a Bible before I left for this journey. Then there is hope, exclaimed Mr. Saved by Grace. Let us run with haste and catch up with his party and tell him at once. I would not have his blood be required at my hands should a real misfortune befall him on his way. And if we tell him, then at least we have done something, rather than keep this historical warning treasure to ourselves. So they gathered up their belongings and made haste to reach the party before they were too far out of reach for them. As they ran, though, each man stored up this historical treasure in his heart. For though it is a simple children's song, it carries great weight. Read your Bible, pray every day, and you'll grow, grow, grow. But neglect your Bible, forget to pray, and you'll shrink, shrink, shrink. The three friends caught up with the party, breathless and earnest, and told them their discovery and the very great message of warning. Mr. Ungrateful only sniffed. What, that old worn book with the moth-eaten pages? He scoffed. Why, I sold that to some old man and got the money to purchase my new trousers. He modelled them gaily. Do they not suit me, gentlemen? I tell you, though I did not think it worth anything, that Bible you gave me, my dear Mr. Newhart, sold for a pretty penny, still prancing around in a most ridiculous manner. So I said to myself, an old book of ancient writing is not befitting a gentleman as dashing as I. No, no, much better to take the money and spend it on something truly useful. Again, he motioned to his trousers, which really were very bright and not at all practical for an outdoor picnic of any public outing. So I had these tailor-made to my exact specifications. With this, he bowed in a dramatic, mocking way and turned to go, linking his arms with two of the ladies from his party, and danced off.